Everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Eric D'Souza, and joining me today is a contributor to Cold Canadian Crime Anthology by Crime Writers of Canada, Elizabeth Elwood. Hi, Elizabeth. How are you today?
I'm fine, thank you. I have my copy right here.
Excellent. Yeah, we're going to focus on that today, but you are on a little bit of let's call it a hot streak. You did win the Crime Writers of Canada's 2022 um, Award of Excellence for the Best Short Story, sponsored by Mystery Magazine, for your story number 10, Marlborough Place.
Ellery Queen. I'm sorry, Mystery Magazine sponsored.
Yes, you're an Ellery McQueen, but Mystery, yes.
Right.
Let's not forget our sponsors. So congratulations on that.
Thank you.
You and I spoke about that earlier when you were shortlisted for that story. So I don't want to rehash that, but what I'll do is, if anybody's watching this, I'll put in the notes a link to the interview that you and I did a few months ago, and they could learn more about number 10 Marlborough Place, which is a fantastic story.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it was an honor to win. I was really surprised and very thrilled.
Yeah, every year there's a category that I look at the nominees and go, oh, that's the tough one. And I knew every name in the short story category this time, and I was just like, wow, that's whoever comes out of that one's going to be a true winner, because all of them could have won.
They're all good. Yes, absolutely.
Along with appearing in the aforementioned Cold Canadian Crime, you were also in Women of a Certain Age, Sister in Crime's recent anthology. So you've been busy.
Yes, there's been quite a bit this year, and they've all been really interesting to write.
So let's focus then on, this story. It starts off, and I'll read it, because A Splinter of Ice starts with a quote. "You are armored, of course, by the creative artist Splinter of Ice in the heart." Quoted from P.D. James, an excellent person to quote from the novel A Certain Justice. I was wondering, did that quote inspire the story, or did your inspiration come from something else?
No, I think it did spring from that quote, because when the anthology, where the submissions were open and the topic was given, Cold Canadian Crime, and I was thinking, well, what can I come up with that would be a little different and yet fit the subject matter, the cold Canadian crime. And I've always, that quote had always really got to me, it really registered. I read the book years ago, but it stayed in my head. And I thought, well, maybe I could write something that deals with artists and use that concept of the splinter of ice in the creative artist's heart, and how could it possibly result in the solution to a mystery. And so it really did spring from that, plus from my love of opera and theater, because again, I thought I'd like to do something maybe that was a little different. And not many people write opera stories. Some do. There are lots of good opera mysteries out there, but it's probably a rare subject. And so putting those two things together, I thought maybe I could deal with that. And then, of course, I thought cold case, right? So we go back several years. And of course, I was in the Vancouver Opera Chorus back in the 70s. So naturally, I'd go back to that period, right, that I was familiar with. And the opera workshop, I was in that too, out at UBC. In those days, it was in the old auditorium, not in the Chan Center, the way it often is now. And yes, so I thought, okay, cold. And then again, set it in winter because we just had lots of lovely snow and picturesque scenery up here. I'm on the Sunshine Coast, and the road and the drive that I described was very beautiful in the snow and the ice. And so I was pulling in the artistic quote, the opera, the cold case, and the lovely magical ice and crystals and snow of the scenery on the Sunshine Coast. So I was melding lots of colds to put it together.
You definitely did. Yes, you took it. You took the title to heart. um, yeah, it's kind of funny. It's not a question, but a comment of just how us in BC perceive winter as so pleasant and light. That's a storm for us.
That's right.
um, well, let's talk about your setting. So your setting does start in Toronto, moves to Vancouver, and eventually finds its way to your neck of the woods where you live on the Sunshine Coast. Was the setting important to you when you were writing a BC story or a Canadian story to write about the Sunshine Coast?
Um, yes, well, yes, actually, it is beautiful up here. I mean, we only moved here permanently 3 years ago. For about 30 years, we were in town in the winter and cottage in the summer. And then we finally decided, no, we really wanted to relocate because we loved it here. And so we turned the cottage into a house. We built onto it. And so, you know, we're still discovering all the lovely corners and nooks and beautiful places. So, you know, we did move here because we really loved it and loved the beauty of it and the peace of the setting. And also because I wanted to have more time to write. And when I was in town, I was always getting sidetracked to direct a play or create a set for a play or, you know, or be on a committee for this or a committee for that. So I thought maybe if I escaped to this country, I actually find the time to write. And then, of course, the lockdown hit, so I had lots of time to write. So, but yes, I do take the opportunity when I can to, you know, to use the local setting. I enjoy doing that. And I've set quite a few stories up on different parts of the coast over the years, even in my series that I wrote, the one I published independently, several stories set on the Sunshine Coast.
Um, Speaking of short stories are typically rather quick, one or two scenes, one or two characters. Whereas I thought in this story, it was a little bit more of a almost an epic feel to it. It's multi-generational. There's quite a few characters. There's development of the characters. Um, was that sort of a statement that you were trying to make that short stories are a lot more than just a couple of scenes, that it can be grander?
I don't so much think it was a statement. I'll tell you, it was really hard to whittle it down to the 5,000. It was longer. I really had to trim and trim and trim. And in a way, yes, that story could have been written as a novel.
Mhm.
Yes, you're quite right. So I really had to go down to the bare bones to write that as a short story. But you know, that was an interesting challenge too. So, but you're quite right.
Ever tempted to write anything longer? Because you've been writing short stories for quite a while now, and sometimes they're
Well,
linked, but
actually, when I mean, I write plays. I've written
Mhm.
4 plays, and they've all been produced quite a few times, actually, which is really nice. I've had about 15 productions within the 4 plays. And but when I started, when the girls were young, actually, I did try writing a novel, and which is still sitting there, and one of these days I will get back to. And a couple more I kind of started, and then I kind of put it aside because I was really busy with theater, and I switched to the short stories. And even with the series I put out, it was connected short stories. You know, there's 6 books, and they do tell an ongoing story of a Lower Mainland family of sleuths, but they are short stories. Within each book, there's 8 or 9 separate mysteries. So so I really did switch to that. Now, in the with the lockdown, I started a 7th book in that series, and the story actually there got away on me, and I ended up writing it as a novel. And I actually sent it out to a local publisher who's kept it for a year. And every time I check, it says in progress. So fingers crossed they're actually interested. So I have written one of my series books. I wrote it as a novel. And so we'll see if I guess if it comes to it, I could do that one independently too. We'll see. So yes, I have, and I probably, if I have time, I might go back to the ones I did that in the earlier days and see if I want to fix them up and do something with them. The other thing I did write, and I should do something with, a memoir of our years with the Marionette Company, in the form of the story of the dog. Max the Ho-Hum Husky was our pet dog that my husband made a marionette of, and he actually bowed with the puppets and the shows. He was very much a part of the whole company. And so I've written a memoir about the story of this dog that became a puppet. And, you know, he was quite a local hero, was written up in the local paper with a big obituary with pictures when he died. As my husband said, I won't get that, but the dog did. So, yeah, so I have written other things, but right now I focus mainly on the short stories or novellas. I just wrote a novella that I sent off, and fingers crossed someone will pick up. Yeah, but still short stories at the moment.
It does sound like the plan of moving to the Sunshine Coast to write more did work.
Yes, it really did, because I love theater, but it's very, very time consuming, and I love the Marionette Company. But I used to spend 6 months in every year just creating the soundtrack, because they were musicals, writing the music, recording it all, bringing in the people to record. So I was really busy doing other things. And so this has really given me time to focus on writing. And it's lovely, especially as I'm getting older, and it's a little less strenuous, right?
I could agree with that. When young people ask me any advice about being a writer, I often tell them, sort of as a joke, but half true, I advise them to learn how to cook and marry somebody with a good earning potential.
That's good advice.
I was wondering, do you have any advice to anybody who would ask you if they wanted to become a short story writer as a career?
Well, my advice would be to really keep trying and not to get discouraged when things come back, because there's always, you might need to revise. You can learn from rejections. You can also, a lot of it's very subjective. And so somebody might not like a story, but somebody else thinks it's wonderful. I think young people sometimes can get very easily discouraged. I know that I was when I was younger. I relate it to my theater experience, because if I didn't get something when I auditioned, I thought I'd only go out and audition for the things I really, really wanted. And that was actually a mistake, because the smart thing is to go out for everything and you gain the experience. And I think with writing, it's the same thing with young writers. If they want to write short stories, they should put something in for every submission that's open, and really hone their craft, and keep try the different subjects, the themes, even if it's not necessarily what they want to write, but write a lot and don't get discouraged. And you're quite right. marry someone who can support you. I mean, I certainly did. So, because I gave up teaching when we had our family so I could stay home with them and do my artistic thing. So worked for me.
Yeah, I have to say, similar path. I've been raising my boys and being a writer, so it's maybe not for everyone, but it's an interesting path if you choose to take it. So thank you, Elizabeth, for doing this interview, and also for your story, The Splinter of Ice, which is just one of the stories that many mystery lovers can find in cold Canadian crime. Available at indigo.ca, amazon.ca, Barnes & Noble, and Apple Books. You could also find links at crimewriterscanada.com. Elizabeth, any final comments?
No, I other than the fact that I really enjoyed the book. So do go out and get the book and read it, because it's very true what William Devereux said in the introduction. There is this tsunami of female mystery writers in Canada, and very good writers, and you don't have to go to all the well-known old favorites to find a really good mystery story. You can find lots of them in this book.
True. Sorry, I was looking down because I'm pretty sure there was one guy in here, right? But other than that,
Oh, yes, there is. That's
I-
they're all good stories.
they are. All right. Thank you very much, everyone, for watching, and thank you, Elizabeth.
Thank you for having me.